You woke up at 3 in the morning last week with that familiar feeling of tightness in your chest, didn't you? That diffuse anxiety that seems to emerge from nowhere, but you know has everything to do with something you can't quite fully name. It's as if your body knows something your mind is still trying to process. Maybe it was after reading another news story about artificial intelligence replacing jobs, or after realizing you can no longer distinguish between human written text and machine-generated content. Perhaps it was watching your 10-year-old daughter converse more naturally with virtual assistants than with you. Or maybe it was that moment when you realized you can no longer imagine what the world will look like in 5 years, and this uncertainty paralyzes you in a way you've never experienced before. This is not just your personal anxiety, it's the harbinger of something much larger that's approaching. In 2026, we'll be at the epicenter of an unprecedented collective psychological crisis in human history, and most people will be caught completely unprepared because they don't understand the fundamental nature of what's happening. This isn't just about technological or economic changes. We're witnessing the gradual dissolution of the psychological structure that has sustained humanity for millennia, and most of us don't even realize it's happening. To understand what awaits us, we first need to recognize that all our mental stability as a species has always depended on 3 fundamental pillars that are now being simultaneously destroyed for the first time in history. The first pillar is predictability of the future. For tens of thousands of years, a young hunter-gatherer could look at his father and grandfather and have a reasonably accurate idea of what his own life would be like. Even during the Industrial Revolution, changes were slow enough for a person to adapt gradually. You could plan a career, a family, an entire life based on patterns that remained relatively stable for decades. The second pillar is the sense of personal agency, the belief that our individual choices and efforts have significant impact on our destinies. This belief has been fundamental to human psychology since we developed consciousness of ourselves as individuals. Even in authoritarian societies or rigid caste systems, people maintained some sense of control over aspects of their lives, some area where they could exercise choice and see results. The third pillar is narrative coherence, our ability to create stories that give meaning to our experience and connect us to something larger than ourselves. For most of human history, these narratives were provided by religion, tradition, community. Even when traditional religious narratives began to weaken, they were replaced by other equally powerful ones: scientific progress, national development, class struggle, the American dream. There was always a larger story into which we could insert our individual lives and find meaning. Today, for the first time in human history, these 3 pillars are being simultaneously destroyed by forces that move much faster than our capacity for psychological adaptation. The exponential speed of technological changes has made the future completely unpredictable. We can no longer look ahead even 5 years and have any confidence about what the job market will be like, what skills will be relevant, or even what kind of society we'll be inhabiting. A programmer today cannot be certain that their profession will exist in 2030. A doctor doesn't know if artificial intelligence will make their expertise obsolete or transform it in unforeseen ways. Parents cannot prepare their children for a world they cannot imagine. Simultaneously, our sense of personal agency is being eroded by algorithmic systems that make decisions about our lives in ways we don't understand and can't influence. Your consumption habits, your political preferences, even your romantic choices are being shaped by algorithms that know you better than you know yourself. What you see on your social networks, what jobs are offered to you, what products appear when you search, all of this is determined by systems that operate beyond your understanding or control. You have the illusion of choice while navigating through options that have been pre-selected for you by machines that have analyzed billions of data points about your behavior, and perhaps most devastatingly, the traditional narratives that gave meaning to human life are disintegrating without equally powerful narratives replacing them. The institutions that traditionally provided meaning, from organized religions to nation states, even science as a source of objective truth, are losing authority in a world where anyone can find an online community that confirms any belief system, where the distinction between fact and opinion has become blurred, where the very notion of shared reality is under attack. The result is that millions of people are experiencing what psychologists call existential disintegration, without even having vocabulary to describe what they're feeling. This is why we see dramatic increases in anxiety, depression, addictions, compulsive behaviors, conspiracy theories, and political extremism. These aren't separate symptoms, but different manifestations of the same underlying crisis, the dissolution of the psychological structure that gave stability to human experience. But here's what most people don't realize. 2026 won't just be a gradual continuation of these trends. It will be an inflection point where multiple forces converge to create an acute, time-concentrated psychological crisis. First, it's when many of the promises and threats of artificial intelligence will begin to materialize in concrete and undeniable ways. They won't be laboratory demonstrations or limited experiments anymore, but massive and visible transformations of the world, of work, education, creativity, decision-making at all levels of society. Second, it's when the generation that grew up entirely in the digital era will reach full adulthood, but discover that the skills and expectations they were raised with don't align with the reality they're inheriting. Third, it's when the economic and social effects of decisions made during and after the pandemic will crystallize into a new reality that many won't be prepared to accept. Most people are preparing for the future as if it were a more intense version of the present, but this is precisely the mental trap that will lead to psychological collapse. They're trying to strengthen old mental structures instead of developing new ones. They're seeking more control when they need to learn to navigate uncertainty. They're looking for more convincing narratives when they need to learn to live without the need for a definitive story that explains everything. The fundamental difference between those who will successfully navigate the crisis of 2026 and those who will be destroyed by it will be the capacity to embrace what we might call existential flexibility. This doesn't just mean being adaptable or resilient in the traditional sense. It means developing a completely new form of mental structure that can function without the three traditional pillars I mentioned. Instead of predictability, we need to learn to find stability in impermanence itself, to develop a sense of continuity that doesn't depend on knowing what comes next. This requires a fundamental shift in how we conceive of time and planning. Instead of trying to predict and control the future, we need to become experts at perceiving and responding to the constantly changing present. It's the difference between being an engineer who builds rigid structures and being a surfer who moves with the wave. Instead of agency in the sense of direct control over outcomes, we need to develop what we might call responsive agency, the ability to influence indirectly through the quality of our attention, our choices about where we focus our energy, our capacity to recognize and work with patterns rather than trying to force specific outcomes. It's like learning to dance with a partner instead of trying to lead alone all the time. And instead of fixed narratives that explain everything, we need to learn to live comfortably with multiple simultaneous narratives, some of which may even contradict each other. This doesn't mean relativism or cynicism, but rather a more sophisticated form of relationship with truth that recognizes that different frameworks can be useful in different contexts without any of them needing to be absolutely correct. This transformation is not optional. Those who cling to old mental structures will be like people trying to use roadmaps to navigate oceans. No matter how accurate those maps are for their original purpose, they're simply not suitable for the territory we're entering. The tragedy is that much of the suffering that's coming is unnecessary, not because the changes can be avoided, but because it's possible to develop the mental capacities that will allow not just surviving these changes, but thriving through them. But this requires recognizing that we are in a historical transition comparable to agriculture or industrialization, not just going through another phase of technological change. The societies that understand this first and begin to intentionally develop these new psychological capacities will have an enormous advantage. Those that continue operating with obsolete psychological assumptions will experience levels of social dysfunction that will make our current problems seem trivial. Let me pause for a moment to ask, do you feel this growing tension between the speed at which the world is changing and your capacity to psychologically process these changes? Those moments when you realize you can no longer distinguish between what's real and what's artificial, between what's temporary and what's permanent. I know many of us keep these concerns to ourselves, perhaps out of fear of seeming like we can't keep up, or for not having adequate words to express something so fundamental. But your experience is valid and probably shared by more people than you imagine. Share in the comments. I feel this disconnection from the future most intensely when your honesty can help others realize they're not alone in this profound transition we're all experiencing. Historically, there has always been a difference between change and transformation. Change is when things become different but maintain their essential nature. Transformation is when something becomes fundamentally another kind of thing. A caterpillar that grows is changing. A caterpillar that becomes a butterfly is transforming. The crucial difference is that during transformation, there's always a period of dissolution where the old form must be completely dismantled before the new can emerge. Humanity is entering its cocoon phase. The problem is that, unlike caterpillars, we maintain our consciousness during the process. We know something is dissolving, but we can't yet see what's emerging. This consciousness of dissolution without vision of the new form is precisely what will cause the psychological collapse of 2026 for those who aren't prepared. But there's something even deeper happening here that most analyses of the future fail to capture. We're not just witnessing changes in technology or society. We're witnessing a change in the very nature of human cognition. For thousands of years, our individual intelligence has been complemented and amplified by external tools, from writing to the internet. But we always maintained a clear distinction between what happened inside our heads and what happened out there in the world. This distinction is dissolving when you can no longer distinguish between human-written and machine-generated text, when your decisions are shaped by algorithms that have analyzed more data about you than you could process in several lifetimes, when your memory is outsourced to devices that can access all human information instantly, where exactly does your mind end and artificial mind begin? This isn't an abstract philosophical question. It has profound practical psychological consequences. Our identity as individuals has always depended on having a relatively clear boundary between ourselves and the external world. When this boundary becomes porous and ambiguous, we experience what psychologists call ego dissolution, but on an unprecedented collective scale. Most people will try to resist this dissolution, try to strengthen and defend the old boundaries of their individual identity. This resistance will create an unsustainable psychological tension that will manifest as extreme anxiety, compulsive behaviors, desperate seeking for control, and eventually collapse. It's like trying to hold water in closed fists. The more force you apply, the faster it escapes. But there's an alternative. Instead of resisting the dissolution of old boundaries, we can learn to navigate in a more fluid and distributed type of identity. This doesn't mean losing our individuality, but rather expanding our notion of what constitutes the self to include our integration with broader systems of intelligence and meaning. Think about how an experienced musician relates to their instrument. There's a clear distinction between the musician and the guitar, but during performance, they function as an integrated system. The musician doesn't lose their identity by temporarily merging with the instrument. In fact, this fusion allows for deeper expression of their individuality. Similarly, learning to function as part of human-AI hybrid systems can expand our capacity for expression and creation, not diminish it. But this requires developing what we might call porous identity, the ability to maintain a continuous sense of self, even when the boundaries between our cognition and artificial cognition become fluid. It's like learning to be a drop in the ocean that maintains its coherence even while being part of something much larger. This transformation of human consciousness is not something that will simply happen to us. It's something we can consciously participate in and shape, but only if we recognize that it's happening and intentionally develop the capacities necessary to navigate it, the implications go far beyond personal adaptation. We are talking about the birth of a new kind of civilization that operates with different assumptions about the nature of intelligence, identity, reality. The societies that understand this first and manage to facilitate this transition healthily will lead the next chapter of human history. Those that cling to old models will experience decades of instability and suffering. What makes all this even more urgent is that these changes are happening much faster than any previous historical transformation. The transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture took thousands of years. The Industrial Revolution took centuries. This transformation is happening in decades. Our psychological, social, and political systems simply weren't designed to process changes at this speed. This is why 2026 will be a year of acute crisis. It's when the speed of external changes will completely exceed the adaptive capacity of traditional human systems. It will be like trying to run 2026 software on 1990 seconds hardware. The system will simply crash. But crises also create opportunities. When old systems become clearly inadequate, there's an opening for genuinely new systems to emerge. The psychological collapse of 2026 will also be the birth moment of a new form of human consciousness more suited to the reality we're creating. The question isn't whether this transformation will happen, it's whether we'll participate consciously in it or be dragged along by it. Whether we'll intentionally develop the capacities that will allow us to thrive in the new world, or be passive victims of changes we don't understand. For those who choose conscious participation, the approaching period won't be a crisis, but the most extraordinary adventure in human history. It will be the chance to participate in creating entirely new forms of intelligence, meaning, and experience. It will be like being part of the first generation to learn to fly, or the first generation to leave Earth. But this requires courage to release the old mental structures that gave us security in the past and confidence to navigate completely new territory without maps. It requires what ancient philosophers called wisdom, not just knowledge about the world, but the capacity to live with elegance in the face of fundamental uncertainty. If these reflections have touched something you've been feeling, but perhaps haven't found words to express, know that you're not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you'll connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we meet here to explore together the great questions that define our era and to seek not just understanding, but also wiser ways to live amid the transformations we're witnessing. This isn't just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth, where we prepare our minds to consciously navigate the deepest transformation our species has ever experienced. Join us on this continuing journey. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to not just survive, but thrive through the metamorphosis that's transforming what it means to be human in the 21st century.
Hello, everybody. And what I want to talk to you today about is the power to shape the world and the power to shape our future. About your power as leaders and as innovators, but also about the power of the human species as a whole. And the big question we are facing is whether AI is taking away humanity's power to control our future, or perhaps AI is giving humanity more power than ever before. And also, can we even speak about humanity, about a single humanity anymore? Or perhaps humanity in the era of AI is splitting into different groups, each with a radically different future. But before we get to AI, we have to say a few words about politics. The relatively stable liberal order of the early 21st century is collapsing. Instead of a cooperative order based on universal values, global institutions, and international laws, we are entering into a super competitive, chaotic world in which only one thing matters, and this one thing is brute force. Leaders like President Trump envision the world as a collection of fortresses, with each country separated from the others by high walls. Financial walls, like tariffs, military walls, cultural walls, and physical walls. This vision may have certain advantages, but it fails to address one key problem. Walled fortresses are seldom friendly. Thousands of years of history teach us that each national fortress would probably want a bit more security, prosperity, and territory for itself at the expense of the neighbors. And in the absence of universal values, global institutions, and international laws, how would rival fortresses resolve their disputes? For millennia, the vision of the world as a collection of fortresses always led to exactly the same outcome: a never-ending cycle of wars, with powerful empires conquering their weaker neighbors and eventually fighting each other for supremacy. This is already beginning to happen all around us. Wars of conquest, which were taboo since 1945, are coming back. Russia already sustained 1 million casualties in its attempt to conquer Ukraine and re-establish the Russian Empire. The Trump administration has already expressed imperial ambitions regarding Greenland, Panama, and even Canada, and seems to support Israel's conquest of Gaza. China, too, has its eyes on overseas expansion. The collapse of the old order is frightening, but it is also, of course, an opportunity to shape a better order. And the big question is, who will be the shapers? In the old liberal order, the ideal was that all humans would be shapers. It didn't matter whether you came from the USA or Brazil, whether you're white or black, a man or a woman, straight or gay. You had equal human dignity, and therefore, in theory at least, your views and interests counted for something. Sure, this liberal ideal was never fully realized. Ideals are not reality. But the liberal world was nevertheless a huge improvement over previous historical models. In the new post-liberal chaotic world, the ideal of equal human dignity is completely and openly abandoned. Instead of all humans trying to cooperate to shape a world that will be good for all humans, the current mantras are me first and might is right. A few powerful people in a handful of countries think that they have the right to shape the world for everyone. If you remember the meeting earlier this year between President Trump and President Zelensky at the White House, whenever Zelensky talked about things like justice or peace or territorial sovereignty of nations, President Trump interrupted him and said, "You don't have the cards. You don't have the cards." As we are meeting here in Sao Paulo to talk about the future of humanity, there are two questions for each of you to ponder. First, do you have any cards? Are there any cards in Sao Paulo? Or are all the cards in Washington, Beijing, and Moscow in the hands of people like Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin? The second question is perhaps even more important. Do you want to live in a world where the only thing that matters is cards? Is life ultimately just a card game with winners and losers? Now, I could have given the exact same speech that I gave now in 1939 or in 1914 or in countless other historical moments when humanity was on the brink of a major crisis. But this time, it's really different. Because as we ask ourselves, who will shape the new world of the 21st century, we need to take into account not only human shapers. For the first time in history, there are also non-human shapers on the planet, AIs. We might be quite close, maybe a few years, quite close to the moment when an algorithm would tell all humans, including Trump and Putin, you don't have the cards. As we enter the era of AI, I want to briefly explore here three questions. What is AI? What is the threat of AI? And how can all of you, business leaders, entrepreneurs, and innovators, help humanity not just survive, but also flourish in the era of AI? So let's start. What is AI? There is so much hype around this term, AI, that the term is now inaccurately applied to almost every machine, and it is becoming difficult to know what it really means. So let me be very, very clear. AI does not mean automation. AI means agency. AI is not a tool in our hands. AI is an independent agent capable of acting and learning and changing on its own. To be an AI, it is not enough for a machine to act independently, automatically. It must also have the capacity to learn and change by itself, to make decisions by itself, and to invent new ideas by itself. As a simple example, consider a coffee machine. If you press a button and the machine automatically makes you an espresso according to a pre-programmed procedure, this is not AI. The machine doesn't learn or create anything new by itself. But suppose that as you approach the machine, even before you press any button, the machine says to you, I've been monitoring you for the last few weeks. Based on everything I've learned about you, and based on your facial expression right now, I predict that you would like to have a double espresso with 1 spoon of sugar. So I've already made you such a cup. Here, take it. That's an AI. It learned something by itself and decided something by itself. And it is really AI if the following day the machine announces, I've now invented a new drink that I call Bespresso, and I think you would like it even better than espresso. So here, try it out. I made you a cup. The confusion about AI results in part from the term itself. The term AI has been invented decades ago as an acronym for artificial intelligence. But it is inaccurate to think about AI as an artificial intelligence if by artificial we mean something that is entirely designed and controlled by humans. AI is not artificial in this sense. So it's better perhaps to think about AI as an acronym for alien intelligence. Alien not in the sense that it's coming from outer space, it doesn't. Alien in the sense that this is a non-human intelligence, it's not even an organic intelligence. It operates on completely different inorganic lines. It therefore is able to make decisions and to invent ideas that would never occur to human beings or to any other organic animal. A famous example of this was given already back in 2016 when the AI AlphaGo defeated the human Go champion Lee Sedol in Seoul. This game became justly famous, not just because AlphaGo defeated the human champion. It was the way AlphaGo defeated Lee Sedol which shocked the world. Because AlphaGo, in order to win, invented new strategies for how to play the game that never occurred to any human player in thousands of years of the history of Go. Now, as long as AI invents new ways to play games or new kinds of coffee, it doesn't seem very important. But very soon, AI will invent new military strategies, new kinds of money, and even entire ideologies and religions. Consider money and finance more generally. If you recall the 2007-2008 financial crisis, you might remember that it was largely caused or started by something called CDOs, collateralized debt obligations. CDOs were financial devices invented by a handful of mathematicians and investment wizards. These financial devices were so complex that they were almost unintelligible to most humans, including politicians and regulators. And this led to an oversight failure and a global catastrophe. Now, what happens if we now allow or even encourage AIs to invent new financial devices that will be orders of magnitude more complex than CDOs and that will be utterly unintelligible to any human being? Such devices could greatly improve financial efficiency and contribute to economic growth, and they could become the bedrock of the global financial system. But what would happen to human politics when no voter or politician is able to understand and regulate finance anymore? And what happens if after a few years of unprecedented boom, the financial system suddenly busts and there isn't a single human being on earth that is able to make sense of what is happening? Now consider the implications for something like religion. Especially, let's take as an example, religions based on texts like Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. For thousands of years, Judaism granted ultimate authority not to human beings, but to texts like the Bible and the Talmud. Flesh and blood rabbis nevertheless had immense power within Jewish society for the simple reason that their holy texts could never speak for themselves. They were mute. Whenever you had a question about the text, you needed a human interpreter. Rabbis are humans who know their way around many Jewish texts, from the Bible to the latest commentaries on the Talmud. This is the source of their authority. Now, over the centuries, so many Jewish texts have been composed that not even the most learned rabbi is able to read all these texts in his or her lifetime, let alone remember everything written there. But of course, this is something that an AI can easily accomplish. AI could quickly read all the Jewish texts ever composed, remember every word in every single one of these texts, and also find patterns in the texts that have so far escaped human notice, human attention, and AI could therefore use its unprecedented scriptural understanding and knowledge to produce completely new interpretations of the Holy Word. And this, of course, is true of Christianity and Islam as well. In effect, AI can start functioning as a holy text that talks back to the faithful without any need of a human mediation. What happens to a religion of texts when the texts start talking? Now, since Judaism invests, as I said, authority in the texts, a flesh and blood rabbi cannot just ignore the scriptural arguments of an AI. And human rabbis will very soon find it very difficult to compete with AI's mastery of the Jewish canon. Even if AI is not granted formal rabbinical status, it is likely that at least some humans, including even some rabbis, would turn to an AI rabbi for scriptural guidance and inspiration. The result might be surprising new developments in very old religions or the emergence of entirely new religions. Now, these kinds of developments have enormous positive potential. They can help humanity in countless ways, from inventing new medicines to preventing catastrophic climate change. But, of course, AI also poses many threats. So let's move on to the second question of what is the threat of AI. The basic problem with AI is not that it is evil. The problem is that it is alien and therefore unpredictable and untrustworthy. At the heart of the AI race, there is a paradox of trust. Humans find it difficult to trust one another, especially as the world is becoming a collection of hostile fortresses. But the people who develop AI somehow manage to believe that we could trust the AIs. When I meet the people who lead the AI revolution, I normally ask them two questions. First, I ask them, why are you moving so fast when there are such huge risks? And the response almost everybody gives is the same. They say, we agree. We know that there are big dangers, and it would be best to proceed with more care. However, if we slow down while our competitors in the other company or in the other countries won't slow down, they will win the AI race, and the world will be dominated by the most ruthless people. We cannot trust are human competitors, so we must move as fast as possible. Then I ask the second question. Do you think you could trust the super intelligent AIs that you're developing? And the same people who just told me they can't trust the human competitors suddenly assure me that they could trust the super intelligent AIs. And this is such a paradox, because we have thousands of years of experience with human beings. We have a broad understanding of human psychology and biology, of the human craving for power, of the tricks humans use to gain power, and also of the forces that keep the human pursuit of power in check. We have also made considerable progress in finding ways to build trust between humans. 100,000 years ago, people lived in tiny bands of just a few dozen individuals and couldn't trust anybody outside their band. Today, there are nations like Brazil with hundreds of millions of citizens, and there are even bigger networks of cooperation linking all 8 billion humans on the planet. Complete strangers often grow the food we eat and invent and develop the medicines that keep us healthy. Of course, we are far from completely solving the problem of human trust, and there are still many tensions and conflicts and wars in the world, but with humans, at least we understand the challenge we are facing. In contrast, we have almost no experience with super intelligent AIs. We have just created the very first prototypes. We already know that even primitive AIs can lie, manipulate, and adopt goals and strategies that were not foreseen by their human developers. We have no idea what will happen when millions of super intelligent AIs interact with millions of humans, and it is even more difficult to predict what will happen when millions of super intelligent AIs interact with one another, creating AI societies, AI tribes. What kind of goals will they develop? What kind of tricks might they invent? True, at present, it is humans who develop the AIs, so we can try to design them in a way that will make them safe for humanity. But remember that a machine is an AI only if it is capable of learning and changing by itself, making decisions by itself, and inventing new ideas by itself. So no matter how human designs them originally, the AIs can then change in a radical and unpredictable manner. And it's a huge gamble to simply trust that these super intelligent alien intelligences will always remain our obedient servants. The humans who despair of trusting other humans, yet think they can trust these alien intelligences, may be making a very, very big mistake. Now, I know that it's sometimes hard for people to understand how AIs might escape human control. Due to the influence of science fiction, when we talk about AIs escaping our control, people tend to imagine a scenario of killer robots running in the streets, shooting people. While something like this is actually already happening in some places like Ukraine and like Gaza, this is nevertheless the wrong image. If you want to understand how AIs can escape our control, don't think about killer robots. Think about business corporations. What are corporations? Corporations like Microsoft or SpaceX or Petrobras are non-human agents. Though they don't have a body or a mind, these corporations can open bank accounts, can hire people, fire people, lobby politicians, and do many, many other things. Now, previously, this corporate agency was just a legal fiction, a fantasy of lawyers. Why? Because in practice, every decision made by Microsoft or Petrobras was actually made by some human being, not by the corporation. Every decision was made by some human executive, human shareholder, human engineer. But with AI, corporate decisions will increasingly be made by a non-human intelligence, a non-human agent. Imagine a corporation that has no human executives and no human shareholders, only AI executives and shareholders. This corporation can make billions and reshape the world. A practical question already today in 2025 is, do we want as a society to allow such things? This is a practical question. Do we as a society allow AIs to open bank accounts, to manage corporations, to trade and invest, to hire people, to lobby politicians? So let us move to the last question. How can humanity flourish in the era of AI? To survive and flourish, we need to remember two lessons from history. First, power isn't happiness. We humans have been extremely good in acquiring power, but so far we have not been very successful in translating power into happiness. That's why today we are thousands of times more powerful than in the Stone Age, but humans are not thousands of times more happy. That's also why the most powerful people in the world, like Trump and Musk and Xi and Putin, are definitely not the happiest people in the world. Secondly, to survive and flourish, we should remember also that intelligence isn't wisdom. Humans are the most intelligent animals on the planet, and at the same time, we are also the most deluded animals on the planet. No other animal can believe the kind of nonsense that humans can believe. For example, my home region of the Middle East is burning in a horrendous war, fueled in part by the most ridiculous fantasies you can imagine. Humans there, on all sides of the conflict, seriously believe that the creator of the universe commanded them to fight and kill other humans. And they also seriously believe that the creator of the universe will reward them for their violence with everlasting joy and bliss in heaven. No chimpanzee will ever believe such nonsense. But many highly intelligent humans believe it. So power isn't happiness, and intelligence isn't wisdom. AI will be more powerful and more intelligent than us. But the power of AI doesn't mean it will bring happiness, and the intelligence of AI doesn't mean that AI will be free from delusions. In fact, a super intelligence might very well be super deluded. Therefore, the big challenge for business leaders and innovators is not how to create more powerful and more intelligent technology. Rather, the challenge is how to develop the wisdom necessary to use all this power and intelligence for good purposes. How to do it? The answer is quite simple. Build more trust between humans before developing super intelligent AIs. Do you know why planet Earth is nevertheless ruled by humans and not by chimpanzees? Not because we are more intelligent than the chimpanzees. Humans rule the world because we know better than any other animal how to build trust with strangers and cooperate in very, very large numbers. We have developed this ability for thousands of years. Unfortunately, just when we need human trust more than ever before, many of our most powerful leaders are busy destroying this trust. Instead of strengthening connections between all humans, they are busy building walls between humans. If humanity is divided, AI will escape our control and will enslave or even annihilate us. On the other hand, if humanity cooperates, we can together develop AI and other technologies in a safe and responsible way. Think about AI as humanity's common child. When we educate children, we know that children learn from what we do, not from what we say. If you tell your child, don't lie, and then the child observes you lying, the child will also lie. Similarly, if you're a tech tycoon developing a super intelligent AI, and you're telling the AI, don't lie, and the AI then observes you lying, the AI will also lie. And if you tell the AI, be compassionate to people, but the AI observes you engaged in a ruthless pursuit of power, the AI will also grow up to pursue power ruthlessly without any compassion. This is why we must first solve the problem of human trust and only then develop super intelligent AI. If AI is developed in a cooperative way by compassionate and trustworthy humans, then the AI too is much more likely to grow up to be cooperative, compassionate, and trustworthy. And all of you have a role to play in that. You are leaders and innovators. Amidst the growing political chaos in the world, the business leaders and the tech innovators still have very considerable power to shape the world. So use your power to build trust between humans. Use your power to build a world which isn't just a card game between ruthless warlords. Build a world in which the dignity of everybody still counts. Thank you.
Every year, more than 1 million people die all over the world in car accidents. Most of them are caused by human error, like people drinking and then driving or falling asleep at the wheel or whatever. Self-driving vehicles are likely to save about 1 million lives every year. This is amazing. You think about climate change? So yes, developing the AIs will consume a lot of energy, but they could also find new sources of energy, new ways to harness energy that could be our best shot at preventing ecological collapse. So there is enormous positive potential. We shouldn't deny that. We should be aware of it. And on the other hand, it's very difficult to appreciate the dangers because the dangers, again, they are kind of alien. Philosophers like Charles Taylor and psychologists and others, they looked into this kind of mental atom of the self and realized, like the physical atom, it's not solid at all. It contains not just multitude of subparticles, but they are constantly moving and interacting and changing.
Did it help you understand something about yourself?
Yes, that what I define as myself itself needs a lot more exploration. You think you know yourself, but you don't. Not just, the kind of individual events of your life. Your very understanding of what is a self is far from self-evident. And it is itself the product of a lot of stories and mythologies which are not necessarily true.